Hello and welcome back to Lightworker Training. My name is Tatiana and I'm so grateful to be joining with you today to get into this topic of willingness. It seems so obvious, doesn't it, that willingness would be required for healing to happen or for anything else to happen for that matter. But like most things, when you dig a little bit beneath the surface, there are all kinds of gems there to discover. So let's dig around and see what we can find in this topic. All right, so it's easy to say, well, yeah, of course, you have to be willing for something to happen, but why? Do you remember I talked about this in the principles playlist? So the reason why it's required is because we live in a free will universe. So maybe there are other universes out there where our free will or consent is not required. But as far as the way that this one functions, our free will and our consent is absolutely required. So that's not to say that sometimes in this realm, consent isn't given through manipulation, ignorance, violence, coercion, outright deception, because we all know that happens. But the reason why deception is so prevalent is because it's a way to get people on board and really invest their will into something, because the more willing you are, then the more power and energy is going into something. So if you're kind of doing something because there's a gun being held to your head, then you are doing it to, for out of self-preservation, right? So you're still willing to do it to save your own life, but you're not putting the same kind of energy into it that you would be if you're like, yeah, let's do this thing, right? That makes sense. So, or hopefully it makes sense. Hopefully I'm making sense. So the will gives things this power. I mean, we can't just be willing. We have to actually follow through and take some kind of action, right? But the more will that goes into the action, the more powerful. So will power is a thing that we talk about, right? Willpower. So our will is a kind of power that we have. We have all kinds of power. We have the power of love, we have, the power of truth, power of will, all these things, right? So will is one of our powers, and one of the will centers in the chakra system is the solar plexus, and that is a real powerhouse center for directing the will. It's related, there's lots of things that the solar plexus is responsible for and related to, but will is definitely one of those things. Another will center in the chakra system is the throat. So that's a higher will center. So if you think about it, the throat is a mental center, and we're talking about the mental realms in this chapter of part 3. So this is where it starts, right? It starts with a thought. It starts with a word. The word going out is casting the spell. It's starting to direct the will, right? We start to vocalize and direct our will, and then following through with a feeling that we get from that and an action that we take based on that. Is also part of that trinity of mind, emotion, body, aka action in the physical. So all of those are part of it. But what you really need to understand for this piece is that your will is your power. or at least one of your powers. So you're most powerful, right? So you put most energy and power into something when you're really willing, and you can be even more powerful when you align your individual will with the higher will of creation. You know, I'm not here to say that I know what the higher will of creation is, that I can see through all dimensions of time and space, and I know what everyone's soul journey is all about, but I don't have to, because I know I can align with my higher self, the oversoul, source energy, and align my will to that higher will, and just make it a feeling or an invocation of, I'm so grateful that I'm coming into alignment with a higher will. And then when I'm scanning energy, getting a read on things, asking questions, listening for answers, inspiration, things like that, then I can trust that what comes through is more likely to be coming from that higher will. Okay, so it's a practice, at first, like anything else, you might not feel very adept at connecting with your higher self and trusting that that is happening. But just like any other kind of practice, the more you work it, the stronger you get, and the more sure you are, the more you learn the language of the frequency that shows you. Because even though each situation is unique, you will start to have this recognition of certain patterns and frequencies and things like that that clue you in. Because the truth is always there. It's always there to be seen, to be heard, to be recognized. But we have to be willing. See what I'm saying here? We got to be willing to see it, perceive it, know it, receive it. Yes, willingness is absolutely key. And you know what? Sometimes we might be in a place of just being like, la, 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 I don't want to know. And that's okay. When we're not willing, it's not really helpful to shame spiral. Unless it brings you to a rock bottom place that inspires you to be willing. I mean, in reality, everything is working for our good. So we're going to learn one way or the other. It might take eons. It might be painful, and that's our choice. But eventually we will learn. We will learn. We're going to be given all the opportunities. So sometimes we're not really willing. And the most helpful thing to do is to just be real with yourself, right? And just be real and accept the fact that this is what's happening until now, right? So maybe now you can find some, dig deep and find some inner strength to kind of hold you up, to find that more, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not authentic, but I'll use authentic, more authentic willingness. So just be real. If you're in that place of not really being willing, tell your inner critic to fuck off, do the work, because there's a good reason why you're not willing. There's probably some kind of, there's another thing going on there, right? Just like I said, you've got to unzip it, look around, dig around, get down to the bottom of it, right? And you'll probably find something like, oh, there's some old trauma. There's an inner child self in there who's afraid, who has a certain belief. And then that belief was reinforced. And I built a lot of different belief structures on top of it. And I enacted those over and over again. So, maybe it's a bit of an ingrained pattern. Maybe there's some other people's shit on it, some fucking parasites on it, all kinds of things could be going on. So it's really important, though, to recognize that is what you are experiencing. Even if it's not yours, you're experiencing it right now. So even just getting real with yourself and calling some shit out and even saying out loud, hey, you know what? I'm not really willing. As you're saying it or thinking it out loud in your mind, you might start to be aware of some of the reasons why. So you could be curious. You could ask questions. Who does this unwillingness belong to? Maybe it's not even yours. Maybe you picked up somebody else's. You can return it to sender. You could ask questions like, what would it take to be willing? And just see what kinds of things come through. You might get a hit on something like, oh, you know what would make me feel willing to do this? Like I did this morning. I said, well, I want to go to the gym and I have some willingness, but what would make me more willing is if I made myself a coffee to go, and then that could be my little reward. It'll just be sitting in a little thermos. When I get out of the gym, I can drink my coffee on my ride home. So, that really ramped up my willingness. And then I had a fantastic workout today. So, what would it take to be willing? And, this is just kind of a silly example, but I mean, hey, if it works, do it. So, yeah, who does that belong to? What would it take to be willing? Who is unwilling? You might see there's an inner child that needs your support. You might see there's an inner critic up in your grill talking shit. You might see that there's some entities fucking with you. So it's a good time to do inner world work. Check out the video, Go Within or Go Without, if you don't know what I'm talking about. As I said in the beginning, I'm going to be building as I go. So I'm going to be referencing things that I've already talked about. So if you're not sure, please go back and check it out. All right. So one of the things that can help you to get to a place of willingness, if you recognize that you're not really willing in the moment, is this question: could you be willing to be willing? Could you be willing to be willing? So I use this, I used to use it all the time. I actually don't have to use this one so much anymore because I do have a lot of willingness because I've been practicing all of this stuff for so long now that I know how it works. And so I trust it. But I used to not have that level of trust and faith in myself and in this work. And so I had a lot less willingness. And so I would kind of use this hack of, okay, I'm not willing to let go of that, but could I be willing to be willing? And I felt like, no, I'm not even willing to be willing. Sometimes I really just wasn't even willing to be willing. And I had to be real about that. I was like, okay, I'm not willing to be willing. Would I be willing to be willing to be willing? And believe it or not, sometimes I was being so stubbornly just holding on to whatever that was creating so much pain in my life. But I still didn't want to let it go. I wasn't even willing to be willing to be willing. So sometimes I'd have to go to, I'm willing to be willing to be willing to be willing. And then I could feel the lightness of it. I'm like, yeah, I could be willing to be willing to be willing to be willing. And then I cleared the energy because I had that tiny bit of willingness. I could let it go. And then once that energy moved out, then I found I was actually willing to be willing. And then I could clear more energy, let more stuff go. And then I was actually willing because I was getting more back to myself. So please feel free to use this when you don't really feel willing to do healing work for yourself, to do the inner work, to connect with your inner child, to, you know, clear energy, to ask questions, to do the things that you know you need to do to up level your energy. Try this because you just need the tiniest piece of willingness, and then you can leverage that and crank up the willingness, because eventually great willingness will be required, but you don't have to start there, because like anything, exercising your willpower is like working a muscle. It's not going to be very strong at first, but as you work it, it will get stronger. And as you have these successes, you can build. That will build your inner strength, that will build your will, that will build your trust in yourself, right? So start out small. If you need to, be willing to be willing to be willing, however many times removed from hardcore willingness, and just start out small. Use that, see if it shifts the energy, see if it brings you more energy. Right? So all of this stuff that we're clearing, it's really just an energy suck. And so some of this stuff can be very expensive energetically. And so we're clearing some of that crap out so that we can have more energy. The more energy we have, the more will, the more power, the more love, the more capacity we're going to have to take on these bigger and bigger challenges. So if you don't have a lot of energy right now, you don't have a lot of love, you don't have a lot of will, it makes sense that you wouldn't really be willing to take on a huge challenge. So start small. Please start small. Don't put yourself down or judge yourself or compare yourself or any particular day or situation or circumstance to anything else. That's not really helpful. I had a teacher who used to say, compare and despair. So sometimes comparing can be helpful, but you know, a lot of times it's just some inner critic program, you know, just trying to keep us at a lower vibration where the critic can feel like I'm in control, you know, and that's okay. You know, that critic doesn't want to be out of a job. That critic's getting some of your energy right now. So it doesn't want you to take your energy away from it, because then it would die. You know, I get it. I have compassion for the inner critic, but also like, I don't want to feed this fucking parasite either. I want to have that energy for what I'd like to create, because the little naysayer, you know, whispering crap in my ear, yelling at me isn't really, you know, what I'm feeling joyful about creating. So start out small, sustain your practice. When you start small and you work small and you take little bites and you start building that muscle, you know, not to say that you shouldn't push your growth edge, because we do need those tests. We need to be tested on a regular basis to push our growth edge. You know, I think about the martial arts way of thinking about this. So when you go into, say you're a white belt and you go into a yellow belt test, when you enter that test, you're a white belt. It's not until you finish the test that you become a yellow belt. So what I'm trying to say is, you know, that's good. You don't achieve yellow belt and then go to a yellow belt test. The test is what up levels you. The test is what up levels you. Okay. So when you're getting tested, when you're being challenged, please remember to see this opportunity for what it is. This is your chance to up level, get stronger in your will, in your trust, in your love, in your capacity to run more energy, right? That's what this whole thing is about. We want to just build our capacity to run more and more energy, because that makes us really powerful. And it makes it so that we can actually blast through a lot of this healing very quickly. Oh, wouldn't that be great? Just blast through this healing really quickly and have a lot more energy that we reclaim, that we can use to create things beyond our social conditioning, beyond our trauma, beyond our wounding. Yes, that's what I'm all about. So when you work with these bite-sized pieces, that's a sustainable practice. You also want to embrace those challenges as they come, see it for the opportunity it is, trust that your sustainable practice is giving you the muscle so that when the test comes, you'll be able to knock it out. So, like I said before, eventually, great strength and power and knowing and love and will be required, because as we go through these tests, we're going to be, when I was training in martial arts, I remember the first time I heard about what went on in the black belt test, and I was just like, oh my God. But I was a white belt, so I didn't have to really worry about what was going to happen in the black belt test, but I was a little bit freaked out by it, as I should be, because a white belt is not going to be testing at a black belt level. So eventually you will have to bring that much energy to the challenge. But when you're in a place where you're, just maybe say you're operating at a little bit higher than very beginner level, there might be some times where you're just feeling like, I don't have what it takes to be functioning at this level, and you don't really have the willingness to engage. Pay attention to that. Like I said, you can sort through the energy, be curious, clear the stuff that's not you, but sometimes your body just needs to process before you're ready for the next challenge. There is a wisdom in the body. The body is releasing things in the way that feels the most graceful to the body. So you're not going to be able to heal a lifetime of trauma in like one ayahuasca ceremony or something like that. And I know like, logically people know this, right? I hope, when they go to these medicine gatherings, but I think we've been sold this bullshit idea of just pop a pill and just go to this doctor, and the doctor will do these things for you, and you'll miraculously get better. Now, it is possible to have miraculous healing, and if we were really operating at our full capacity, then we could and we would. But we've carried a lot of this energy for a long time, and it would break our bodies or our minds if we tried to unlock it and process it all at once. It's just too much to process all at once. So if you're feeling a little overwhelmed, just take a break, give yourself a break. That is also an application of your will. So there's a secret here, that you're always doing what you will to do. You're always seeing what you want to see. You're always doing what you will to do on some level, right? So even if you decide you're going to kind of sit in your resistance or not look at something, you're still doing what you want to do. You're a badass. But, I'm just saying, sometimes it takes time to process through this stuff. Let's see. I think that's all I want to talk about today. I think that's it for willingness. I think that's a good chunk of info and maybe some ideas to add into your practice. Start to sprinkle some stuff in, season your practice, see what you like. I like that one. Oh, I don't like that thing Tatiana said. Hey, that's cool. I'm not saying that you have to use any of this or all of it. Just use what works for you in this time. Maybe you'll come back in a few years and say, wow, I'm not into that old thing anymore. I'm into this new thing. So, I do recommend taking some time to integrate and then going back and listening again. You might hear something that you weren't ready to hear or just wasn't the right timing for that. And so that's kind of how it works. Yep, that's it for today. Thank you so much for being here. And I'll see you next time on Lightworker Training. Bye for now.